Welcome to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Miley, an IFS-informed certified trauma recovery coach. This show features interviews from survivors all over the world as they share their impactful story of thriving in their post-traumatic growth. We explore resources, tools, and coping skills to support the trauma survivor community. Enjoy. So welcome back to the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Miley, an IFS-informed trauma recovery coach. I have with us today Lorraine Nilon, and Lorraine is an Australian author, podcaster, emotional and spiritual mentor, and life coach. She specializes in helping others reconnect, recover, and rejuvenate through self-reflection and exploring grounded spirituality. She has over 20 years researching personal growth and spirituality. She has developed a comprehensive approach to self-awareness that ignites curiosity about our inner wisdom and emotional well-being. She is renowned for her empowering, judgment-free guidance, and she believes that we all have to deal with our emotional baggage and do the inner work before we can evolve emotionally and spiritually. Her spiritual grounding approach is about recognizing that we're all worthy and good enough. So whether you join her on her podcast, read one of her books, or take a course, you know that she's providing a safe space to explore your own inner truth. Her goal is that through reconnecting, recovering, and rejuvenating our relationship with ourselves, we can resolve the barriers to living a more meaningful life. Lorraine, thank you so much. It's great for you to be here. So I know you have been working with childhood abuse victim clientele over 30 years. How did you find yourself professionally in this role? What was your journey like?
Well, actually, it was a surprise. Oh, thanks for having me, Sarah. It was a surprise to me that was the clientele that I unofficially attracted, because it's not my history. And I always say that the victims, the survivors, so I refer to them as victims when we're talking about the abuser, because you are a victim to the abuser. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
You didn't deserve it. There's nothing you did that encouraged it. So you are a victim. And it's understanding that victimhood is a present moment experience.
Yeah.
And then you can move on to being a survivor, or you're actually moving on and feeling traumatized.
Yeah.
So like I always sort of give some details for that, because the trouble with someone that has had extremely traumatic experiences, unless you get your head around it, unless you really deal with the inner stuff, then you stay in that victimhood.
Yeah.
So when people were coming, about 70% of my clientele back when I first started was victims of childhood sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So what I started to do was I started to see themes that these people, completely different abuse events and stories and all the rest of it, which were quite horrific, and you've got to get used to listening to them, which can be difficult for therapists and things as well.
Yeah.
That I started to document it, and then I would sort of look for these themes, these threads that was happening for all of them. And it took me 12 years, and I ended up writing Breaking Free from the Chains of Silence. And from a soul perspective, I always put, like, I am spiritual, but spiritual, when I say grounded spirituality, it's really looking at the reality of something and knowing that you are worth healing from it. It's an experience, it's not who you are. And then, we go chasing to try and fix ourselves and make ourselves feel better. Sometimes it's just processing the stuff that we haven't processed yet.
Right.
And any trauma, as you would know, is stored in our system.
Yeah.
And it creates, I was talking to someone last night, actually, and I said, when we don't deal with our trauma, and there's no set time to deal with our trauma either, you deal with it when you can, but if we don't deal with it, what happens is that it builds belief systems and control structures, and then they become our patterns. And we don't recognize them, we don't see them. So part of what we're doing when we're trying to heal, or we're trying to come to terms with our history, is we're trying to understand what patterns it also created from these points. What were the waves that went out that have become our familiar? So that's my approach to abuse. So people just kept coming, and I kept documenting it. So, and I must admit, I got to a stage where I couldn't cope with hearing any more stories about childhood abuse. And I sort of shut down that part of the business for a while, because it was just, you get to a stage where you think, I couldn't possibly hear anything else that's going to shock me. I'm starting to harden to this.
Yeah.
Whereas you should always be shocked
Yeah.
by someone treating another person so insignificantly, because that's what they walk away feeling. And I've found that thread now too in people that have had narcissistic parents or relationships or even co-workers,
Yeah.
that they end up feeling that sense of insignificance, that they can treat them that way. And narcissism's a little bit different, because you're in that confusion of first giving grace, okay, that person they didn't mean it that way. They're not, and we're lucky now that we do have the resources to sort of educate ourselves a bit better on YouTube and podcasts and books. Whereas if you go back 30 years ago, we didn't understand any of that.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure. The education is certainly available now for people so that they can have some tools to recognize. What's more important is to have the tools of how to leave those situations. If you're able, it's different if you're a child, because you can't just pack your bag at 12 and be like, bye. But then looking back, like, oh, I was in that kind of a relationship. That's where there's ground for healing there, which I can really appreciate. I know you work with a lot of these clients as narcissistic abuse, and if they've had narcissistic parents when they were children, why is the dynamic of narcissistic abuse just so damaging? And what are some of those beginning steps for someone who's trying to heal from that type of damage?
Well, the first thing is it's similar. See, I see similarities between childhood abuse and narcissistic childhood abuse. Like, so the experience is different, but the residue is the same. It leaves the child feeling like they are unworthy, right? The person they're relying on, or the people they're relying on to feel safe in the world, are the people that are actually abusing them. And sometimes it's the comments and all the confusion of trying to, we're always, as humans, we're always trying to put the pieces together.
Right.
We're, trying to complete circles. A lot of the time when I've got clients, I'll draw a circle and I'll say, look, there's a quarter of this missing, and you keep trying to fill it, but you haven't sort of looked at the full circle to be able to complete it. So you're doing these things that are trying to complete the circle. So even as kids, we're trying to complete that circle,
Yeah.
and we start believing that we are the problem. The
Mm.
child believes they are the problem. Why children do that, I don't know, but they do.
Yeah.
And so, and when you've got anyone that's raised by someone that's narcissistic,
Mm.
then you've got this confusion, because one day they can be nice to you, and the next day, for no reason at all, you can't put the pieces together. They've decided that you're the worst thing in the world, and you're the reason that their life's not going
Mm.
brilliantly.
Yeah.
So, and a narcissist is always going to throw blame and shame
Mm.
at a child.
Yeah.
So they grow up in that environment. And one of the things with trauma is, because most people think trauma, we think a big experience,
Yeah.
right? So there's a pinpoint. But a lot of the time, especially with narcissistic childhood abuse, is that it's chip away, chip away, chip away, chip away. That's the same for relationships when people are older. It's chip away, chip away, chip away.
Yeah.
And we want to believe our abuser loves us.
Right.
So we start turning ourselves inside out to trying to feel that love, trying to complete that circle. I love you, so surely you must love us, love me. And that, when someone's traumatized in that kind of thing, and then the other thing that re-traumatizes them is they don't feel supported. They don't know how to self-support. They're too young. They don't know how to put the dots together. They don't know how to put pieces together. So all of a sudden, this trauma They start feeling completely unsupported and isolated in it. And then, our mind goes to so many dark places about ourselves. So we build this library of self-judgment.
Yeah.
And then that they create belief systems and structures.
Yeah.
And then we operate from those belief systems. So the trauma creates the belief of who we are. Now, it's completely wrong. And
Yeah.
it's often very opposite to that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the sad part.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So when you're a child, what's super important to recognize when this is childhood abuse is, like I know you had said, like you don't know why we tend to blame ourselves, right? And the shame kind of goes on to us. Obviously, it's coming, systematically from your abuser. They're trying to make you feel that way. But when it's in your childhood, that mammalian brain that needs to have caretakers, we have to have caretakers until a certain age. If we start going, wow, they're evil, they're horrible, they're terrible, that creates a safety issue. There's a danger issue to the mammalian brain. And so we have to focus inward and go, that it must be my fault because my caretakers can't be bad. If they're bad, I'm dead, right? And so the
Yeah, yeah.
brain has this way of twisting itself inside that says, and also there's a control pattern here because you can't control their behavior, but you can control your own. And so now the brain's new idea is, well, you just have to get better. Well, your grades aren't good enough. Well, you're not pretty enough. You're not tall enough. You're not thin enough. And it's trying to create that control back. But really, as communal mammals, we have to have caretakers. And if they're bad
Oh,
or evil, that's so dangerous.
oh, absolutely. And the sad part is that when we are children, there's no ability to look at reality the way it is.
Right.
Besides all that happening is that you can't look at reality because most of the time you're going by feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like regardless of, I can say something, but it's got a tone to it.
Mhm.
And you can hear the words that you go, that didn't sound too bad, but the tone. So they straight up, you're in confusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have no, as soon as you're confused, you have no way of processing that reality. So
Yeah.
you can't look at the adult and go, hang on, they're at fault,
Yeah.
because you can't get through your own confusion mechanism. And then even after you've had that as childhood and as you get older, you don't realize that, I call it the confusion fog is still working.
Yeah.
Like you're still in that state of confusion because nothing's actually adding up to you.
Yeah.
So you become stuck in that self-judgment. I'm the problem, there's something wrong with me, which is your shame reactions.
Yeah.
And then you're constantly blaming yourself
Yeah.
and letting everybody off the hook.
Yeah.
So you either become a people pleaser or you become extremely indifferent to yourself and everybody, become very aloof.
Yeah. That is so
Yeah.
true. That is very true. And I like the word of the confusion fog because the
Mm,
brain doesn't have to want to work harder than it has to. If it found a solution, in
yeah.
your abuse, you're the problem, and shame keeps you quiet so you don't get beat as much or so you don't get in trouble as much. You're doing the best that you can. You're trying to please as best. If that worked, it's going to continue to work and your brain says, "Check. I don't have to think about that anymore. I found a solution." It doesn't necessarily care that it's an unhealthy solution. The brain has no idea. It's just doing something to keep you safe. So I love that you started to kind of jump into this bit of indifference, and I definitely want to go there because that's a huge part of what you do.
Mm.
You say that the role of indifference in that part of the abuse cycle is massive on really on both sides. So tell us more about why indifference plays such a role.
Yeah, well, actually, when I look at breaking free, which is why I could convert very easily to narcissism, is that it's really a book about indifference. What happened when someone becomes indifferent to you, and in this, they do not care how their actions are impacting you. They don't care that there's longevity to it. They don't care at all about how it's shaping who you are, especially as a child. And it's for all the reasons that we've already talked about, it's really hard to understand that person is indifferent to you, right? Because we are herd animals, that we want to be accepted, we want to be supported in our herd. So we struggle to comprehend what indifference is. Now, the abuser has to be indifferent to you, and what it then does is it often causes the victim to become indifferent to themselves. And when we look at that poor child that's being abused by any means, and they're turning inwards for a survival mechanism, and they're beating themselves up, and they're, attacking their self-worth, they're believing that they're, worse than nothing, then that's being indifferent to themselves. But they can't see that. They can't see that it is self-attack. They believe that's who they are. So, and indifference is like a spectrum. We can all be indifferent. We can all be selfish. We can all have moments where we forget what we're doing, how it could impact someone else, and we just do it. So we can all be on the spectrum, but then when it goes to the extreme, we get narcissism, abusers, all the rest of it. Yeah. And it's really hard when you feel, especially anyone that's grown up with a childhood of abuse, whether it's narcissistic or, physical, mental, emotional, regardless of the type of it, you're already conditioned to know that when someone goes indifferent to you, there is no barrier, there's no boundary. They're not going to stop until they get their fix. Right? Until they've exhausted what they're looking for and they get their fix, especially with narcissism. It's all about feeling in control and superior. Generally, 99% of the time, because they feel so inferior.
Sure, yeah.
Right. So they're going to take it from somewhere else. So to discard someone, that makes someone feel so insignificant. Right. So it takes them down to that level of feeling so unworthy, inferior, all those kind of things. That their self-judgment's going to jump off on that. So then they're going to work out, especially if you're a child that's come from that kind of abuse and now you're in a relationship again as an adult with someone that's similar. You're going to try and work out, how do I appease this person? And sometimes it's going to work. And then you're going to tell yourself, oh, this is what I've got to do. And when we look at those things, is that we're trying to work out, it becomes a control structure for ourselves. We're trying to work out how to not feel so worthless. Oh, that worked. That person smiled at me. That person, let me come in. That person, all of a sudden my mother was standing there going, oh, isn't she wonderful? In front of somebody.
Yeah.
And when we realize the indifference, we realize, oh, it wasn't to make me feel better.
Yeah.
It was to show off in front of the person that she was trying to impress, which wasn't me. And when that person, whether it's a child as they're growing up or someone in a relationship, realizes that's what's just happened, that creates confusion fog as well.
Yeah.
So so that level of indifference and our reaction to it. So when you've experienced it and then you feel that indifference, you feel someone's not interested in you or not going to take your feelings into consideration, you react from that whole history of pain. Yeah. And then you start beating yourself up again, going, oh my goodness, I can't control my emotions. What's wrong with me? But it's that you felt that energy of indifference. And for you, it's a fear, because that can go anywhere, especially childhood abuse, sexual abuse. That feeling can take them anywhere.
Yeah.
So it creates the unsafety that you feel in the world. So then you don't trust yourself, you don't trust other people, and you're trying to work out, how do I survive in this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There would be a lot of room for people that have suffered with this, of learning to self-trust, right? So then if
Yeah.
only you're the only one in the room that you can trust, it's still okay, because you've got yourself. And I talk a lot about authenticity, and kind of like returning to this authenticity, kind of reshaping and allowing your authenticity to shine, not hiding it anymore, right? You have an interesting take. You say, instead of finding yourself, it's actually more important to understand yourself. What does understanding yourself really look like for survivors?
So even that experience there that we just used, right? If that person understood I react to indifference and I've just felt it, all of a sudden you know why you're reacting.
Yeah.
So instead of automatically running into the shame or the blame or the guilt, some people feel guilty because they can't control their emotions.
Yeah.
You have an understanding of, oh, because I have this history, I'm reacting. That person, it's got no boundaries. I don't feel safe next to them. I don't trust them. That's okay.
Yeah.
Now I know what I'm reacting to. And when you understand that, all of a sudden you start building mechanisms
Mm-hmm.
that help you cope with that. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of automatically running back into self-judgment, you go, okay, I know that about this person. I'm going to trust my awareness. I'm going to trust my intuition if you want, but I'm going to trust my awareness. I'm going to trust my observations. Because a lot of the time when we come from, especially narcissistic abuse,
Yeah.
we stop trusting our observations. So what we're seeing, we go, is that their intent? Is that what they mean? So all of a sudden we're, sort of second guessing ourselves.
Yeah.
And I always say to clients, okay, so when you observe it, go, okay, there was an edge to that. There was a tone to that. I may be misreading it.
Yeah.
It may not be their intention, but I am aware that I felt it.
Yeah.
And at this moment, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but I'll know that I felt that tone. And then you can gather evidence. Oh, they're doing it again. Oh, so-and-so came over and now they're putting me down. Okay, this is deliberate,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're understanding what you're experiencing. And
Yeah.
then you can choose how you respond, which is different to being triggered. So, but that takes a while.
Yeah.
That's not something you can just white knuckle yourself to. It's like
Aw,
really,
I brought you on this show to tell us that you can, though, Lorraine.
I
I
wish I
wish.
could.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
same. I'm always like, I wish there was a magic wand. I think it's really important for people to understand that there's a moment that you can see yourself being yourself. Then you can gather all of these insights. And I like this. I like the phrasing that you put of it, of just kind of seeing that if I'm right, great.
Mm,
But if I'm not, I'm going to choose to give the benefit of the doubt because there's actually more damage in a what could be in a healthy adult relationship, which feels very foreign to a traumatized, abused brain.
mm.
So if you are going to decide, I'm going to choose to trust this person, not acting on these instincts that my trigger wants me to act on, but I'm just going to watch it and I'm going to notate it because you are still looking for red flags. You have
Hmm.
to, right? There's so many people in the world that are willing to just red flag all day long and hope they can get away with it, right? So you just
Yeah.
maybe notice it. It's a beige flag because I don't know if it's how I translated it or what their intention was. And you wait, okay, second time, all right, maybe now we're at a pink flag. And then after that, it's time to run because now I've attracted another type of person to myself like that. And that gives you back all of this control, all of these it's very empowering. I'm just hearing a lot of empowerment in that language.
Yeah, definitely. And can I jump on something there? Is I try to not use the word attract,
Mm,
right? Because as soon as people hear this, I mean, I do this myself. As
yeah,
soon as I hear someone tell me, "Oh, you've attracted that to you,"
right.
all of a sudden it's going to feed
Mm,
my self-judgment. Oh, I'm wrong again. I'm making a mistake. I'm the problem. And
yeah,
whatever version you've got.
yeah,
Instead, say, what I can observe is this. All
yeah,
right. I'm not the reason that this is happening,
right.
right? Because that's what attract does. And I find it quite damaging to a lot of people is that, that, oh, because I haven't healed, I'm attracting this, I'm attracting this. No, because you're aware of what that is,
Right.
you're observing it and you're seeing it.
Yeah,
And what that does empower someone,
yeah,
right? We can have 10 people sitting around a table and you've got someone that grew up in a narcissistic relation, had a narcissistic mother or father or even brother,
yeah,
sister, etc. They can pick it because then they get the indifference. They understand it. Oh my God, this person does not care. how they impact. They're being arrogant, but they're willing to take anyone out. They're willing to make them feel shameful. They're willing to embarrass them, humiliate them. And we all feel threatened by the fear that someone could humiliate us, because that tells everyone that we're with that I'm less than everybody that's here, right?
Yeah.
So, and we use humiliation as a control structure all the time.
Yeah.
So you are aware of that kind of energy because you've experienced it, right? So you sense that, you feel that, right? You didn't attract it. That person and you were in that room, that meeting, whatever. So you're not attracting it, but you're observing it.
Yeah.
And then that way you can actually give yourself permission to work with your awareness and to empower it as another sense. You know, we trust our eyes, we trust our ears.
Yeah.
Okay, trust how you feel when you hear a tone, how you react when somebody's looking at you with certain facial expression.
Yeah.
So give yourself permission, and all of a sudden you become an objective observer when you can do it without feeling triggered. Or if you are triggered, you recognize the trigger fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And you can put the pieces together. Oh, that person looked at me and give me the, you know, who do you think you are, look?
Yeah.
That triggered me. And now I'm debating my worth in my head, and I'm starting to feel embarrassed about myself, and I'm starting to feel humiliated. You can put those two pieces together.
Yeah.
But you can't do that when someone says, you're attracting this to you. Oh, I'm the problem. Oh,
Right.
I'm observing this. Ah, I can see it, dot to dot, put them together. Now I can see the picture.
Yeah. You have a heightened sense of awareness. That is for sure. With this comes so much work. It's a lot of work. I know,
Yeah.
personally and professionally. Where does spirituality play a role in this for you and your clients? Is it a connection to source? Is it a connection to something greater than themselves, or is it themselves, in this empowering role? When they have to do this work, it
Yeah.
wasn't their fault. They didn't do anything. Here they are, and now they have somebody else's work to do to fix the
Yeah.
damage that somebody else did. And we know it's exhausting. And I'm so sorry to all of our listeners. There is no magic wand. Does
No.
spirituality kind of support, encourage? What part is this in?
So for me, I look at spirituality as part of your uniqueness. So it shouldn't be just a belief system that you adopt. Spirituality is to know yourself and be present in your reality, but know that you are connected. So I talk a lot about the soul. The true essence of who you are is the soul that's inhabiting this body at the moment. And, there's a longevity to this soul journey.
Yeah.
So that part of the way I look at it is that we're all born for a purpose, and I class the purpose as evolution, that we are trying to evolve, and anything that we've created that's not in alignment with the truth of our soul becomes emotional baggage, and we store it. So my job this lifetime is to deal with the emotional baggage that I've carried forward and try not to create more. So it is a stripping away, the old expression, it's an onion. So it is a stripping away process, and all the experiences that we have this lifetime, we can use to really explore who we are. So, and some of us have got terrible experiences. So, our cage is rattled, which in one way is good because it stops us from ignoring it. So I try to go, well, okay, well, we can't change history, but let's use it to our advantage. Let's see what we can get out of it. Again, not blaming the victim, not saying that you actually put your hand up and this is what you attracted in, is that this is what you've experienced, because especially childhood abuse, whether it's narcissistic mothers or sexual abuse or whatever type of abuse, is when you're a child, you are at the mercy of the adults around you. You don't have a choice. As an adult, you have a choice of how you're going to treat and respect yourself. And part of spirituality is learning what is in the way of you truly respecting yourself. So And, as much work as I've done on myself, I'm still finding places where I'm not respecting myself as well as I know I could. But that's also how I'm finding the stuff that I need to resolve. And sometimes you've got to give yourself a rest too. As you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Like people that have got big histories, they're always trying to fix themselves. They're always trying to find themselves, all those kind of expressions. It's like, give yourself a rest.
Mhm.
Get, if you have an aha moment or you've put the two dots together, two pieces together, give yourself a moment to celebrate that.
Yeah,
Oh, got it. And
yeah,
then let yourself relax a little bit. And then you'll know when you're ready to explore some more. Because I always look at spirituality as an exploration of yourself, your relationships, and your relationship from your origins, however you want to refer to that. You're connected to where we're from, and
yeah.
however you want to assess that is your unique path.
Mm,
But we all have that true connection to where we're from.
yeah,
You don't need a middle person, but you can get some insights in how to do that better
yeah.
by spiritual teachers and alike. So
Beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
Lorraine, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. With our last few minutes, I'd love to just ask you on your healing journey, what have been maybe just one, two, three of the most helpful, important resources for you?
Actually, for me, it was really going on YouTube of all things and understanding narcissism. So
Mm,
I had a big understanding of indifference
yeah,
from my history, but and the stuff that I documented. But when I started really researching narcissism, it made a lot of sense. And especially for children that have grown up in, having a parent of that, you don't realize, but once you start gathering good information about, okay, this is a thing, this
yeah,
isn't because of me, this is something,
right.
then you can start putting the pieces together. So, the most benefit that I've got is really understanding the reality of narcissism. And I think for a lot of abuse victims, that makes a big difference.
Yeah,
So I had a client the other day, and it was about hoovering, like an ex-partner from 20 or 30 years ago, and they every now and then would ring her, and she said, I didn't answer the phone. I was like, I just don't want to go down that path again, because
yeah,
this person's just ringing me up and going to tell me all his problems and rah rah rah, and then he's going to say something nice about me, and I kind of think it's all just BS.
mhm,
And I was like, it is BS. So I said to her, do you know about hoovering? And she said, no. So I said to her, I'm going to ask you to go and, instead of me telling you about it, go and research it.
yeah.
Like,
Learn about it, see it, see some examples. Yeah, that kind
course,
of thing.
yeah. And then she came back and she was like, he's been doing that for 30 years. And because she was in the exploration of it and she could put the dots together, it's so more powerful than someone saying, look, this is what's happening. It's like, yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden she goes, oh, and I reacted this way because of this reason and that reason. So she was closing that circle.
yeah.
So she no longer takes his phone calls.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Oh, I love that. That's great
Yeah.
advice there to that's part of that understanding yourself. So, Lorraine Nilon, thank you so much. Please tell people where they can reach out to you, where they can find you. We'll have it all linked up in the show notes so people can go follow you and see your stuff.
Brilliant. I've got Spiritual Explorers podcast. So we go into trauma, we go into life, go
Nice.
into spirituality, but interview a lot of self-help authors. So, or anyone in that genre. Also, you can find me on my website, lorrainenilon.com.au. Don't forget the AU.
Yes.
And I've got a YouTube channel which we've sort of kicked off last year. So
Nice.
we're starting to build that up a little bit more, making sure the podcasts are on there, and we'll start getting a few more thought-provoking videos out there.
Nice. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to have all that linked up for the viewers and the listeners down below, and they can reach out to you and certainly follow the work that you're doing. It's very, very important. So keep it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Alrighty. Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you for listening to or watching this episode of the Trauma Survivorhood podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and follow. For any information that was discussed in this podcast episode, check out the show notes below. Until next time, be well.